Okay, I believe we are live. So thank you everyone for joining us today. You may not see me, but I am in fact here. So I will call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. So here is our land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kmahi, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Roll call time. Liz, can you see your interpreter?
I don't think Liz is here.
Liz, are you here? Hearing nothing, okay. Annie, did you receive any regrets from Liz?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, this is Amy from the clerk's office here, and seems to be a few folks who are having technical issues today. Yes, okay, Liz just said that she can see us in the chat, so we are good to go, Chair.
Okay. Kristen, are you here?
Chair, Kristen is not yet with us today.
Okay, thank you. Rochelle, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Excellent. Miss Mahoney, are you here? Yes, I believe she is, but we've all heard her, so let's mark her as here. Miss Nicole,
I'm here.
excellent. Wonderful Vice Chair, Jackie, are you here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Excellent. Jordan, are you here?
I am here, yes.
Excellent. Councillor Russell, are you here?
I am here, yes.
And Councillor Diego Gammon, are you here?
I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Councillor. So the minutes have been sent around. Can I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved, Councilor Diego Gammon.
Thank you, Councillor. I need a seconder, please.
This is Rochelle. I'll
second.
second.
Okay, I think I heard Rochelle's first, voice first. So I will say seconded by Rochelle. All in favor of
Aye.
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 any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Next. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Has everyone seen the order of business? Yes. Are there any approvals or additions and deletions?
Thank you, Chair. The clerk's office did not receive any requests for additions or deletions today.
Thank you. So there are none. Moving on. Yep, moving on. The agenda being approved as presented. I need a mover for that.
I'll move, so Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. And seconder.
I'll second that, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Councillor. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we have no business arising. Do we have any conflicts of interest? Okay. We have no deferred business. Do we have any petitions or delegations, Annie?
Thank you, Chair. The clerk's office did not receive any correspondence or petitions for today's meeting.
Okay. Presentations, we have none. Information items brought forward, we have none. Reports and discussion. Today we have a couple of presentations, the first being accessibility in the HRM streets, sorry. So I will ask Ann Sherwood, Director of Transportation Design and Construction Services, to begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's turn on my video here. If I can. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Sherwood. I'm the Director of Design and Construction here at HRM. And today I'm going to be giving a brief overview of some of the accessibility measures that we take in HRM streets. I'm just going to pause to share my screen. And I don't know if I can do that, Annie. I may need your help here. It appears to be locked from my end.
My apologies, Anne. This is Annie from the clerk's office. I just cut out for a little bit while you were speaking, but I am going to share my screen right now.
Thank you. So we can move to slide 2. Thank you. So just as an overview for today, as an introduction, as I said, my name is Ann Sherwood. For those of you that may not be able to see me, I am a middle-aged white woman with, shoulder length auburn hair. I'm currently wearing a gray blazer and black and white printed top. And I am the Director of Design and Construction and Public Works. So today my presentation covers some accessibility measures that are in our Red Book, which is formerly known as our Municipal Design Guidelines. And we'll also be touching on how decisions are made about installing accessible infrastructure in our right-of-way, and as well touch on the implementation timelines of accessibility measures in the build form. If we could move to the next slide, please. So I wanted to share the philosophy behind our municipal design guides. And that philosophy is that using a complete streets approach provides streets that are safe, convenient, and comfortable for people of all ages and abilities, and includes various modes of transportation. And I felt that was quite topical for our discussion today, and that is our sort of guiding principle. Next slide, please. So some of the accessibility standards and guidelines that we look to when completing our municipal design guidelines are the Accessibility Act of Nova Scotia, which, as you may know, we are still working through the regulations that are coming as part of that act. And we've been working with Melissa Myers as well through the province to get an understanding of what those might be as they come through. And that, comes into play when we look at our guidelines. We also refer to the Transportation Association of Canada, pardon me, Geometric Design Guide. And that is sort of a national guideline document that is used by provinces and municipalities across the country for all things relating to streets and roads and sidewalks. With respect to more specifically accessibility standards, we reference the Canadian Standards Association, and the guide in question there was the B651 guide, which is updated in 2018, and most recently got some updates, I believe, in 2020. We also have looked into the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification. And again, for that document, it's not necessarily a standard, but more a rating of how you are, achieving the standard. It's still a good reference. And we also, from time to time, review the National Association of Transportation Officials, or NACTO. They have several guidance around different pieces of infrastructure. Next slide, please. Oh, pardon me. The slide you were just seeing showed a photograph of a man approaching a marked crosswalk using a white cane. And the crosswalk is a marked crosswalk that has tactile walking surface indicator strips on it. Thanks, Annie. Next slide, please. So some of the definitions that we have in the Red Book, we talk about accessible as being planning, design, and programming that enables access by people with a variety of physical and intellectual abilities. We define all ages and abilities, or AAA, as planning, design, and programming that enables use by people of all ages with a variety of physical abilities, and barrier-free as design that enables access by people with or without a variety of physical abilities. Next slide, please. This slide speaks to sidewalks. So that's one of the first things that comes to mind when we think about our right-of-way and accessibility is sidewalks. So our sidewalks in HRM are required to have a minimum width of 1.5 meters of clear travel way. And sidewalks, walkways, and multi-use pathways are to have a maximum grade of 4%. Next slide, please. Pedestrian ramps is a key piece of the sidewalk infrastructure, and that's what we see when we approach intersections. When we approach an intersection, both sides of all intersections that have sidewalks are to have pedestrian ramps, and they're also to be installed at all community mailboxes. All pedestrian ramps are to be installed with tactile walking surface indicators, which are known as TWSIs. Next slide, please. Following along with intersections, when we talk about crossings, all curb ramps are to have depressed curbs and pedestrian ramps. We also install audible pedestrian signals, pardon me, at all signalized crossings. So all traffic signals have audible pedestrian signals. And as well, when we're looking at design, that we use walking speeds at crossings that should be achievable by all ages and abilities. And that's a fairly recent change where that speed has been lowered to what it would have been used a few years ago. And we look at access from intersections to bus stops. Next slide, please. So speaking of bus stops, we have a requirement that each bus stop have a minimum pad area of 2.5 meters by 1.5 meters. That allows room for the ramp from the buses to deploy and for users to be able to complete a turn for those using accessibility devices. If a bus stop is not connected to an adjacent piece of sidewalk, it must have a pedestrian ramp that allows access to the street. And it's also, I thought, important to note that a sidewalk or a bus stop is not considered fully accessible if the surrounding network connections are not accessible. So if it doesn't connect into a sidewalk, we have the ramp to the street, but that's not considered a fully accessible bus stop quite yet. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Another important consideration for accessibility is often grade, or what we call vertical alignment. So that has two pieces to it. One is the grade of the street itself, and the other is the crossfall of the street or sidewalk. So the maximum grade of a local street is 8%. And that has been recently reduced last fall. Previously, it was 12%. And the maximum grade of all other classifications of streets, so arterials and collectors, is 6%. With respect to the cross slope, so the cross slope of a sidewalk is 2%. And the maximum allowable grade of the sidewalk itself should be 4%. You may see a difference here between 4, 6, and 8. The language that's newly put in the red book is that if the street grade is greater than 4%, then additional measures may need to be taken to look at how we can make the sidewalk or the walkway accessible adjacent to the roadway. And there are certain, anything outside of these guidelines needs to be reviewed by the municipal engineer for a variance. Next slide, please. When I was reviewing the guidelines for different accessibility measures, some of the things that we don't talk about very often, but I thought were important to mention is a driveway, and that the continuity, having trouble this afternoon, the continuity of sidewalk, so the material and the cross slope and the width shall govern a driveways. So the sidewalk would be continuous across the driveway, and that applies to driveways and building access as well. And The accessibility and continuity of the streets and sidewalks shall govern. And that includes the material, the cross slope, and the width. So having the priority placed on the pedestrian infrastructure rather than the driveway itself. Next slide, please. Next slide is speaking about community mailboxes. So the community mailboxes themselves are managed by Canada Post. However, we do have guidance in the Red Book that speaks to the fact that mailboxes shall be located on local streets wherever possible, and on the side with sidewalks if they're already there to ensure accessibility. And Canada Post does have separate guidance on ramps for their mailboxes if they're placed in a location that doesn't already have sidewalks. Next slide, please. I also wanted to speak briefly about street furniture and amenities. So we have guidance in the Red Book that says that street furniture and amenities shall not interfere with pickup and drop off at accessible parking spaces, bus stops, and taxi stands. We have a defined height and type of seating. So accessible seating should be between 430 millimeters and 485 millimeters from the ground. It speaks about adjacent firm areas to the clear space, of clear space next to the seat. That is not part of the route of travel, and that the accessible seating should have that clear space, and that's intended for service dogs or people using wheelchairs or scooters or strollers, and that they can sit alongside friends or companions. We also look at a variety of seating options to support a range of users and functions. So benches with backs and armrests, and some in certain places, and backless benches give more choice in which way to look at things. We also look to provide seating in the areas where we provide seating about every 400 meters so that folks have a place to stop and rest along their way. Next slide, please. It's just a quick note about waste and recycling receptacles, and that they're not to overhang the street or the sidewalk, that they shouldn't be mounted more than a meter, and that they should be reflective for contrast visibility. So just generally wanted to note that there is a range of different pieces to the accessibility components of the Red Book, not just some of the things that we tend to talk about more often. Next slide, please. So this slide shows one of our draft accessible parking standards. It shows an engineering drawing that looks at an accessible parking space that would be near an intersection, and it details the dimensions that would be required, and also the clear space next to the parking space for access and egress to the space. Next slide, please. This slide speaks about an accessible parking space that would be in a mid-block area. And differently than the previous slide, this one additionally shows a pedestrian ramp that would allow access to the street. Because if we're in mid-block, we may not be near another access point. Next slide, please. This is the draft, or part of the draft detail for an accessible parking space that has a side aisle. And this would only be possible in a place where we have about 4.5 meters of sort of sidewalk or pedestrian realm width. And that's to allow room for the side access aisle, which is about 2.4 meters wide, and then to make sure that we still have an adequate space for the sidewalk in behind for people to pass safely. And these details are draft right now. In addition, with the side aisle detail, we have to double check with the Motor Vehicle Act. There's language in there right now that talks about how close to a curb you're supposed to park. And so having a side aisle with a curb that's 2.4 meters away is sort of technically contrary to that. So we're hopeful that it's just a matter of clarification and that this meets the intent of that note, but it's always important to ask. Next slide, please. So moving on to when we install accessible infrastructure. So our policy is that all new and replaced infrastructure must meet accessibility standards. So new developments that have been approved after the updated standards, that follow those standards, all new streets, and that any retrofitted work, if it's being replaced, it needs to be and changed, it needs to follow accessibility standards. For example, if we're replacing a pedestrian ramp that may not have the tactile truncated domes right now, the new pedestrian ramp should have that. If we are changing the nature of the street and making it, changing the lane widths or things like that, then all of the new standards are sort of triggered by that change. So we're just going and repaving a street, certain aspects may not be triggered, but if we're going in and moving sidewalk and curb and boulevard around, then that's when most of things would apply. And if a design is not able to meet the new standards, so sometimes we have older streets that are narrow or too steep or something like that, then that needs to be documented and approved by the municipal engineer. And that goes through a committee of HRM staff from various business units that look at the nature of the variance. Next slide, please. So with respect to implementation timelines of accessibility measures in the built form, so as I just mentioned, anything that is new or being replaced is required to be replaced to the new accessible standards. And we're currently working with Melissa Myers and the Accessibility Task Force and others in Public Works, our prioritization and budgets and timelines for the replacement of the existing infrastructure. As you can imagine, there's a lot of it in HRM, and so trying to figure out where we should best be spending our time and our budgets to get things replaced over time. Another thing I thought I'd mention, that my colleagues in project planning and asset management, when they do their regular inspections of infrastructure, they take into consideration, the accessibility features now. So they look to see if tactiles have been installed with ped ramps and things like that. So that's considered part of the state of good repair now, which is new in the last few years. And that's my last formal slide. So I'll take any questions that anyone might have. Thank you. You may be on mute, Annie. That's usually my trick.
My computer doesn't like me today. My apologies, folks. Okay, we do have time for questions. So, Ms. Mahoney, are you able to join us for questions?
Though Chair, I believe Michelle has dropped from the meeting, so perhaps we can try coming back at the end.
Okay. Nicole, do you have any questions?
Online now, thank you.
Jackie, do you have any questions?
Not at this point, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the nice presentation, though. It was very informative.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Jordan, do you have any questions?
No, Chair, not at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, do you have any questions?
At this point, I'm good. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for that presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Digo-Gammon, do you have any questions?
Always, Mr. Chair, always have questions. Thank you, Anne, for the presentation, and welcome to your new position. Congratulations. I don't know if my colleagues know that Anne has taken on that new role, so a lovely promotion, well deserved. And on the community mailboxes, because a lot of my district is rural, I'm just wondering around and being rural, there's no sidewalks. So when Canada Post is looking to choose a location, can you just sort of talk through the process of who they connect with at HRM in deciding the location that they choose, and then the accessibility feature, if that becomes part of the conversation? I've seen Canada Post choose a location a couple of times, and I'm thinking, if you're driving a car, even to get out of the car to get to the mailbox might be an issue. So if you were getting in a car and using a mobility device, it would be even much more challenging. So could you just speak a little bit to how that process happens, please, and thank you?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor. So right now, because Canada Post is sort of seen as an external agency, the group that they work with is the right-of-way department in traffic management. That's under Chris Davis. And they work with Canada Post. They don't technically need to get a streets and services permit because they kind of outrank us being a Crown corporation, but they are very cooperative, and they do work with Chris Davis and his team to find suitable locations. And it can be challenging depending on the neighborhood to locate and to see. I know in certain rural areas, they often look to find there's a specific detail for the more rural locations. I don't have it to hand right now, but look at places where people can pull off the road safely and see if there's places nearby that they can make it easier for people to get at. But
Okay.
It'd be good to follow up with Chris Davis's team on that particular piece of it.
Okay, I'll do that because I am kind of interested about how they, the focus or the attention that they give to accessibility in terms of the community mailboxes. Thank you. And one other question was just around one of the slides where you talked about the side parking where there is, and so you're going to be checking with the Motor Vehicle Act right now. So do you perceive any concern with that coming up? I mean, it does from the image, it looks like it's a great option and it's a little bit different than what we currently have. So it is better. But do you foresee any issue with that?
I can't say for sure what the province may or may not say to that. I know we do have locations now where we sort of have an exception to that rule. If you're familiar with Prince Street in downtown Dartmouth. So
Yes.
There's a pressed curb and then you sort of park on the other side of it right now. And then there's the sidewalk on the other side of that again. So We're hoping that this would be treated as something similar as sort of if necessary, as an exception, or that we would consider the place follow sort of the edge line of the road and have the side aisle be considered as something else other than the sort of official curb line consider the edge of pavement. And that I think would satisfy the MVA, because that's the idea, is that you're not supposed to park too far away from the curb or the edge of pavement because you don't want people to park in the middle of the roadway. I think that's where the intent of that is. But
Right.
until we specifically reach out to the province and get their feedback, I'm not sure. And I think that conversation is probably going to be led by Victoria Horn's team in parking. And that is probably going to be done, with some other folks in public works, working with Lucas's team in traffic and working with my team in design. So we'll be following up on that.
And will you be able to advise this committee when that is approved?
I can ask that we provide an update when those details are approved and when we hear back from the province.
Oh, thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you for those questions, Councillor. Liz, do you have any questions?
I have a few actually. And first of all, I'd also like to say thank you for the presentation. So there were a few things for me that I was kind of unsure about that I'd like to speak to.
Sure, I was on mute. Go ahead.
So number one, for the metal pieces, for the tactile pieces for blind individuals.
Yep.
It's important for them to be there for people to be aware, but they're also able to become icy quite easily. So that could be a slip hazard too. So I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about that. I know that I have slipped on them before. So just to have that perspective as of an everyday sort of walker, that there should be some sort of warning that that's there, or if there's a way to have ones that are not able to be frozen. Because I've never thought of that happening before, but like I say, it did happen to me. So just a heads up or something to think about.
Yeah, so thank you for that. One of the material we're using now as our new standard is cast iron. And so the cast iron tends to have a bit of more texture to it. And it does still have the contrast between the plates themselves and the concrete next to it, which is important to have that visual contrast. And again, the pedestrian ramp detail in particular is one of those details where we are threading the needle very tightly between the things that are things that might be a barrier to certain users, but that would be ideal for other users. So for example, if you're someone—
Just to clarify, I'm not looking to
Sorry.
be critical.
Yeah.
on it.
No,
Just-
no. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's the cast iron has texture to it. The plastic ones might be more slippery, but we don't tend to use those much anymore because they're very difficult to maintain as well. Thanks.
Okay. And number 2. Sorry, the interpreter's just looking to see your hands better. And number 2, for the steepness or the steepness of the inclines, I know that some of the areas are quite steep, so they can be really challenging to sort of go up or go down. So one really good example I tend to talk about a lot, and I think a lot of other people do as well, on Brunswick. And I'm trying to think of the cross street for the Brunswick there, Brunswick and Duke, I believe.
Duke? Yeah, that's a sort of usual suspect. So
yeah, that's really steep incline there. So
so there's not too much we can do with existing streets like that unless we completely take apart the neighborhood. But that's why it was so important to us to make some changes in the Red Book in the fall for new streets, so that new streets don't get us into the same situation that some of those streets that have been here for several hundred or decades do. So those streets that cause us challenges to walk up, they're challenges to have transit go up in the winter time. They just, cause a variety of issues. So we're trying to limit that as much as possible.
yes, no, for sure. I just want to say that. And I also have one more as well. In relation to the benches or the seated areas. And you're speaking to having a space so that dogs are able to be there. So I'm wondering, will you have some sort of railing for individuals who maybe would need assistance in standing and sitting from the bench? Or are the benches just sort of sat alone benches where there's nothing to sort of hang on to in case you have some mobility issues?
So I think it's a mixture. So if you look at the new installation on Spring Garden Road, I finally had a chance to go through there not that long ago. Some of the benches there have backs on them that you're able to get your feet underneath them to help yourself get stood up, because if you have a solid front, that's sometimes more difficult to stand up. And as well, some of them do have armrests that you're able to use to help get yourself up.
Yes, okay, I have seen the ones on Spring Garden Road and those look great. So that's a really great start.
Thank you.
I have seen a few new accessible features downtown, and it's great to see. And I actually have a 4th. It's a bigger issue, I guess, and I'm not even sure if it falls under your preview or not. If you just cover Halifax and Dartmouth area as well. But the issue with people who are driving and stopping at intersections and not being able to see the cross traffic because of things that are barricading. So I guess just to be sure, when you're setting up things, that you're not sort of blocking the sight line of drivers who are trying to cross through intersections. Sometimes it can be bushes or sort of greenery that's been added to the new accessibility features. Sometimes I find the utility boxes as well. Some of those are right in the intersection area. So if you're parked and you're trying to look to see if there's any oncoming traffic so that you can cross the street or merge into traffic, it can be really challenging. On Morris and I believe it's Lower Water Street, there's an intersection there. And that's really hard to see when you're at the intersection there. You really need to sort of pull out into traffic quite quite far before you're able to see if anyone's sort of driving or not. So that can be really challenging and a little scary at times. I'm not sure, is that something that falls under you, or is that a different department? Is it provincial or municipal?
So it would fall under HRM. So it's typically the traffic department under Lucas Pitts that looks into that. And so downtown, it's sometimes challenging because we have buildings in the way that have been there for a long time that are quite close to the edge of the road. But when we're looking at new things, we do take that into consideration. We look at what kind of vegetation we might be planting near the intersection. We look at the best place to put the traffic signal controller box, which is one of those electrical boxes that are often near intersections. They need to be close so that the staff can stand there and see the signals while they're adjusting them if the power goes out or something like that. But it's important to put them in a place that doesn't block sightlines for people driving or people walking across the street to see if they've got, they're clear to go. So yes, that is something that we do take into consideration when we're doing our detailed design work. And if there are any issues that you see, like if there's vegetation that might be overgrown or something like that, you can always reach out to 311 and they'll get that addressed. Thanks.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was 211 or 311. Okay.
Anything municipal is always 311.
Yeah, sometimes they don't have texting, which can be challenging for deaf individuals. They require a phone call, which isn't always easy for everyone. So
Sure.
okay, that was it. That was the 4 that I had. So thank you for answering. I just wanted to throw some of those out there as thoughts. Yeah, just some different ideas that I had. And maybe even if there isn't things that could be moved out of those intersections in order to clear the view, you could add mirrors, and then you can look to the mirror to see sort of the intersections when you're parked in different areas and trying to enter those areas, if that makes sense. Yeah,
Sure.
it can be a little challenging, particularly if it's a red light and the other direction has the green light and you don't want to scoot out and be hit. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, for pointing out all that valuable.
I'm very visual, so that's why I catch those things.
There you go. Thank you. Kristen, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Kristen has not joined the meeting today.
Okay, thank you. Rochelle, do you have any questions?
Hi, thank you. And thank you for that presentation that offered so much information. It was great. I have some like clarifying questions and then some more like, I think actiony questions, just in terms of like understanding the presentation a bit better. What the first one was, what do you mean by max grade for like sidewalk and vertical alignment? I was a little confused and I was like trying to quickly Google it during and was like, I should just ask instead.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. So the grade along the street, so that would be like the steepness of the road. So we talked about Duke Street and how Duke Street is very steep. So that would be, more than 15% probably. So that's really steep and way more than we want. So now our maximum grade is 8. So that's a lot flatter. And then when I talked about the crossfall, that's if you're on the sidewalk, that would be the way the crossfall sort of sheds water towards the road. And that's typically about 2%. And as a comparison, a shoulder on the highway is about 4%, so a little steeper. And that's about the range where we want to be, because that allows the water to drain off and not pool, but it's not so steep that anybody's in danger of tipping over and stuff like that. So that's how those two interact.
Cool. Awesome. That is so interesting. Things I would never think about.
I think so, but
cool. And then another question I had was around the side aisle parking. I thought that was so cool. And yeah, is there already like a side aisle parking example in the HRM or like
not that I can think of. Okay. And I think part of that is it takes a lot of space. And so certainly like downtown, we'd be hard pressed to find a place that had that extra 2.4 meters that isn't already used for sidewalk or the parking space itself. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of an aspirational thing that we're trying to find, good places for it, and working with all staff, always, making sure that all of our teams are aware of these things so that we can try and find places of them. If we get to a point where we're changing the use of something and we take a lane out, maybe this is an opportunity for it, or, you know, who knows. But knowing that it's there and having the standard in place, and certainly being able to put it into, you know, new commercial areas that may have on-street parking, for example. Hopefully that's where we'll see one of these days.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. I was just trying to like wrap my head around what it would look like, especially in the HRM where there
Yeah,
can
it would
be
sort of
less
look,
space.
yeah, it would kind of look like a bump out, except the car wouldn't be in the bump. The car wouldn't be in
Right.
the parking aisle. The car would be out in the sort of the main road, and then what we normally use is the parking aisle, like on North Park Street. You know, sort of there's cuts out where cars park.
Oh yeah. Right.
It would kind of look like that, but shorter. And then the car would be not in it. So then that would give people room to get out of the vehicle and sort of, you know, do what they need to do and then go onto the sidewalk instead of having to do that from the street or from the sidewalk.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Sort of,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the other question I had was around, and I'm not sure if this is like, again, like your office sort of like purview or if it's something else, was around like signage of these accessibility features. So like signage for accessible parking, you know, sometimes it's not super obvious or people are ignoring it. It's hard to say. I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. But, you know, and same with like signage around, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like other things. I mean, if there's signage around like curb cuts or just like warning people, or the signage for the sound making light situations of like how to use those. Yeah, just that. Yes, I find them a little hard to notice sometimes unless I'm like actively looking for them. And so I guess I was wondering if that is your office, and if so, is, you know, what's sort of, is there anything being done, taking that into account, thinking of like improved signage, especially around accessible parking? I find it's very hard to see.
Sure. Yeah. So the signage falls under the purview of the traffic group, also in public works. So that's Lucas Pitt's team. And the signage, if it's regulatory signage, so like, you know, you have to or you can't do something signage, then that is all approved through the province through the Motor Vehicle Act. So it's, you know, very particular and make sure that we all know that it means the same things and we're not making up new signs and stuff like that. So that would be Lucas's group, you know, kind of through the province. But also there's a connection with the parking group and where they're placed. So the sign itself is part of it, but then also where the sign is might be part of it. And I don't know if where the sign is also, you know, regulated in the same way, but it's something perhaps that maybe we could follow up through with Lucas.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like Lucas has come up a lot and would love to hear from this person too in a future meeting.
Yeah, Lucas is the new director, not quite as new as me, but the new director of traffic. And so he, if you had met with Tasso Koutrelakis before, I don't know if he's been presenting to the committee at all, but he retired in December. And so Lucas is the new director in that group.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, last question. In terms of, and this is again, like, is this part of your purview or not? In terms of like upkeep and sort of accountability of all of these accessibility features, who's in charge of that? What's the process? You know, whether it's like things being too icy or something breaking, or even like during when like a construction project starts and the whole road and everything gets changed and like the built environment gets changed, kind of who's keeping tabs on this stuff and what's the process for that?
Yeah, so it's really sort of a three-part piece of it. So the overall sort of state of good repair, what we call asset management of it, falls under my sort of co-director, the two new ones, is Ed Surratt. So he's the new director of project planning and asset management. So his team goes out and does inspections on things every couple of years, all the sidewalks, all the roads, to see, you know, if they're good or bad or failing or cracking more than they were before. Do they have ped ramps? Are they in good shape? All that kind of stuff. And then if there's, you know, day-to-day issues, like if there's a pothole or if there's a sidewalk tripper or something's icy, then it would go to the infrastructure maintenance and operations folks under Bev Audette. So if it's a snow clearing thing, that falls under Steve York. If it's, you know, got a maintenance issue, that would be another part of Bev Audette's team, and they go out and they respond to those calls and do the little fixes. And then if it's to the point when the little fixes don't work anymore and the whole thing is just bad, like the analogy I kind of use is, you know, are you painting the shingles? Are you replacing a couple, or do you have to get all new siding? if you're at the all new siding time, then that's when it comes to my team. And we do the, you know, the full street repairs and stuff. So it's a bit of a group effort, I'll say. So Ed's group is looking at, you know, how, you know, the overall state of the union kind of thing. And then the day-to-day calls and maintenance is handled by Bev's team. And then if it gets to the point when the whole thing needs to be replaced, then it comes to us.
Cool. And then in the case of like construction then and how that affects the built environment, is that a separate office? Is that like also
So,
this sort of
yeah,
thing?
so my team is design and construction can happen a couple of different ways. So if it's capital construction, so like a whole new siding, then it's my team. If it's the day-to-day short-term construction, it might be Bev. And if it's construction being done by a utility or a developer, that might be, you know, overseen by another part. But we, you know, the good news is we all talk to each other. And we're all looking at updating our standards around accessibility in the pedestrian realm and different things. And we've had lots of feedback recently about that and things like that. So that's coming. But yeah, so the construction can be sort of triggered by multiple different things, but we're all trying to be consistent in how we approach it and what accessibility features we have during construction. And, you know, and again, once it's being replaced, then we make sure it's being replaced to the new standards when it's done.
Cool. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, Ms. Mahoney, have you joined us yet? Hearing nothing, I will thank you, Anne, for the presentation. A lot of questions and discussions, and the more of that we have, the clearer things are. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks all.
I think I'm going to ask Marie. Did I say that right?
Very close.
Very close. All right. Well, close counts in my book. Mary, that she's the Director of Strategy for Halifax Public Libraries, and she has some words for us. So you now have the floor.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Mairead Barry, and I am the Director of Strategy for Halifax Public Libraries. And I am a white woman in a white shirt with a virtual background of Halifax Central Library, but I am actually in Alderney Gate in my office, and the offices for Halifax Public Libraries are here in Alderney. Just a little bit of a brief introduction for those of you who don't know. Halifax Public Libraries serves all of the regional municipality, and we have 14 branch locations from Hubbards to Sheet Harbor, as well as community offices and more increasing community touch points throughout our community. And so I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you a little bit about the work and just give you a few examples of the work that we're doing at Halifax Public Libraries to support accessibility, to remove barriers, and to ensure access and participation by everyone. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Annie, I hope this will work. It looks like it will. Okay. So I think, can you all see my screen share there? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I think one of the first things I'd like to mention is that as public libraries across the province, and certainly here at Halifax Public Libraries, we feel that the library can be an important partner in achieving an accessible community. And so we have been working hard to identify and remove barriers to participation. And while we're proud of the work that we've done so far, we know that there's a substantial amount of work left for us to do as well. So we acknowledge that there is still much to do to ensure that everyone has equal access to and participation in library services and events. And so today I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing to improve accessibility. I'm going to say hi to Liz because she will know a lot of this information already. Liz sits on the Halifax Public Libraries Accessibility Advisory Committee, and we do have, Hi. And we have other community members as well who help to set the direction and guide Halifax Public Libraries in identifying and removing barriers. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about is the library collections. On this slide, we have a picture of books on a shelf. So the library collection is the books, it's the materials, it's the resources, it's the information that we have available for our public. And over the last several years, and in fact, it's been a cornerstone of libraries, is to ensure that our collection is diverse and has a variety of different formats that are available to support as many community members as possible. So we have things like large print books and audio and wonder books. We have descriptive and closed captioning videos, Braille, and new to libraries in the last few years are downloadable and streaming services that allow access to books, magazines, newspapers, music, and movies. So we try to offer as many different formats as possible for our community members to access the information that they need to build knowledge, but also for enjoyment and for pleasure along the way as well. So one of the things that some of you might be aware of is that libraries across Canada have access to a variety of alternative format collections. And the Centre for Equitable Library Access, CELA, is one of the largest collections. They offer over 450,000 accessible items, including things like we just talked about, descriptive videos, newspapers, audio books, e-text, Braille formats. There's a lot of different options that are available through CELA. You'll see on this slide that we have a little social media post about our CELA collection. So in addition to the services that we offer at the library, we also are concentrated on ensuring that we're promoting those services, that the community knows that we have these options available. We also have another service called NNELS, which is the National Network for Equitable Library Services. And they again provide additional accessible items similar to CELA, but they also have interesting and different items from CELA. So most recently, access to information about COVID-19, up-to-date current information about what's happening in the pandemic is not always in accessible forms. And NNELS has done a lot of work on trying to ensure that those are available in accessible formats. And also even down to sort of testing instructions, like how do you do an at-home COVID test? Those instructions are available in multiple formats through NNELS. One of the things that the library is also engaged with in relation to our collection is we're part of a national organization that is pushing publishers to create accessible formats right from the first point of publication, rather than what happens now is items are published, so a book is published, and then CELA or NNELS will work to build alternative formats of that text to make them available. And so part of the work that the libraries are doing is really to push publishers to create content themselves in accessible formats that can be available to everybody in the community. One of the things that we're doing with our collection too is thinking about other things that individuals might need in their life to borrow from the library. We're sort of the originators of the sharing economy. And so there's new and different things that you can get and take out from your library. So there's things like light therapy lamps or radon detection kits. And one of our unique borrowing options is our autism toolkits. These are a series of kits that have different tools that might be of advantage to individuals, but they sometimes can be really expensive. And so the intention behind the autism toolkits is an opportunity for an individual to borrow a kit, try using some of the tools that we have in these kits. They can see what might work for them before they make an investment in that purchase. So for example, we have a sensory tools kit. And so a family or an individual might buy that, and it has weighted blankets, it has ghost suits, it has noise canceling headsets, all sorts of things along those lines, and they can test out what works for them before investing in a large purchase. Like some of those can be quite expensive. So that's just a sample of some of the things that we're doing in our collection to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. As I said earlier, we also are really keen to ensure that our collection is promoted to the community. So we see that not only in the accessible services that we offer, but also giving voice and celebrating the voice of individuals who have experience with disability. So you'll see the screenshot on this slide is of some of our staff lists that pull together content that may have been created by individuals with disabilities or might feature heroines or others in the stories that focus on the experiences of people with disabilities. So this is just an example. So as I said before, we're also keen to ensure that we're building community awareness about the resources that are available and the experiences of individuals in our community. So some of the other library services, so the collection is our largest service, but we have lots of other things that we do at the library. One of the things that we're very proud of is that it was our community identified to us that having late fines for library materials was a significant barrier to individuals accessing the library. And it also disproportionately affected individuals living on a reduced income. And so we knew that, well, we all know those stories of your childhood library where you were afraid to go to the library because you had an overdue fine, and so you would avoid using the library. We feel that the library is a great resource for the community and that everybody should feel welcome there. And that a fine for a late book should not prevent someone from getting the information that they need or accessing the services that they need. So in 2020, we did remove all late fines from the library. So you no longer have to worry about getting a late fine. We do ask that you still return the book. And if you don't return the book, there might be a fine associated with that. But for the most part, as long as the book comes back to us, doesn't matter when, you're fine. And at that time in 2020, we also waived and unblocked all the cards that had any fines on them at that period of time. So we unblocked over 37,000 cards that day when we made this decision, and that immediately allowed those individuals access to borrow and use library services. And so this was a major improvement to library service, and we're very proud of what that has accomplished and how it has opened the doors to many individuals to return to the library, or individuals who we knew were continuing to use the library. You can always use our spaces and our computers and all of those things, but weren't able to take books home with them. This opened that back up to them. So a major improvement to our service a couple of years ago. Another service that some of you might know about, but some of you may not, is the library offers a home delivery and borrow by mail service. So for individuals who can't come to one of our physical branches or maybe live rurally, and so it's very difficult for them to access one of our library branches, a library employee or a volunteer will deliver books and materials and content to individuals at home, pick them up and bring them back. Some library users will do all the selection. They'll decide what they want to have. Some will just say, you choose what you want, what you think I would like. And our staff sort of develop relationships with individuals over the years, and they get to understand the types of materials they like to read or have, and then they're delivered right to their front door or through the borrow by mail service if that's an option for that individual, and they are shipped through Canada Post to those individuals. We also are trying to always look at new and improved ways that we can offer services. I pulled out a blog post here as an example of something that we did recently, in particular in our children's areas. So we added in Sparksfly bikes, and I'm not sure if any of you have heard of these before. They're very popular in the school system. They are a stationary bike, basically, that kids can use while they're reading. And because that physical movement creates a bit of a deep breathing situation, which helps restless children to self-regulate and to stay calmly focused and alert. And so they have found that it actually really helps with some children to improve their reading and literacy skills if they are actually kind of doing something else at the same time as they're doing reading. So you can see some new SparkSply books at some of our locations. There's a few other pictures on this screen that just show some of the sensory and play and exploration activities that we have available for young children at the library. So again, just a sample of some of the things that we're doing to help improve service. One of the things that I'll also say is we do have a large number of library programs that are offered throughout the year. A lot of them, since COVID-19, are virtual, and we're continuing with virtual programs, but we also are back to in-person programs, which is very exciting. A great opportunity also to build awareness. So library programs that specifically address the needs of individuals living with disabilities, but also building awareness for the broader community. And so I'll say a big thank you to Melissa and her team too. We partner with HRM to build awareness campaigns. So on this screen, you'll see one of our social media posts about International Day for People with Disabilities that we did a promotional campaign around this year. On this next slide, there's another social media post around our Access Awareness Week in Halifax. Again, we worked with HRM as well as other community partners and organizations to develop an accessibility portal over the last couple of years. Because of COVID, we moved a lot of resources online into that environment. And the portal really is about elevating and celebrating community voices, stories, and experiences in order to build a common understanding of why building an accessible Nova Scotia is so important moving forward. So I have a screenshot here on the next slide. This is just a screenshot of one section of the accessibility portal. Again, that's where you'll find blog posts about some of the resources that the library has available, upcoming events, some of the collections that we have, and things like our home delivery service. I would encourage you, if you haven't checked out the accessibility portal, to go ahead. There's lots of really interesting information. And we update it throughout the year and then also promote it heavily during awareness campaigns that we rerun periodically throughout the year. Oh, there we go. Next slide. So I just wanted to highlight here, these are 3 programs that are coming up at the library. And there's always throughout the year a variety of different programs that we have on offer. And these are just examples of some. There's one on making and changing laws. There's another that is the Nova Scotia Works Opportunity Place booth will be coming to one of the libraries. We also have a series at Central Library going on over the next couple of months on exploring assistive technology with Makers Making Change. So these are for individuals who haven't yet had to use assistive technology or adaptive technology. And so it's a series to introduce that to community members. Again, these are just samples you'll see throughout the year. There's lots of opportunity. And the majority, I would say, of our programming is built in collaboration with community organizations and with individuals. So we rely heavily on our partners to provide these programs. I also wanted to talk a little bit about library spaces. So if you have been to a library or you've been to several, you know that they are all very different. And different levels of accessibility within the library system. So I will say this is a picture of our Kesh and Goodman library, the entrance heading into Kesh and Goodman. In 2017, we did accessibility audits of all of our libraries, and we have been working to make improvements and to meet any of the requirements that were identified. We've added ramps at locations, we've added accessible washrooms. There's been a whole series of projects that we have done to improve our spaces. But we also know that there continues to be work to be done to improve on our library spaces. So we are continuing in that path. The other thing is that we recently received the phase 2 built environment standards from the province, which we were very excited to see that libraries were specifically identified and specific requirements were developed for libraries. And we were also very lucky that Jen Powley, who sat on that committee, was also part of the library's Accessibility Advisory Committee. So we had some great knowledge from Jen about those standards that have just come out. So that will be important for us moving forward as we look at our spaces. So here's just a few examples of some of the things we've done in our spaces. This is our new service desk standard. So if you've been to a library location, you'll see that we're moving in this direction. These are more accessible for our employees. They're fully sit-stand station for our employees. That's one of the things that we know from our audits and from our community consultation is that in many respects, our spaces can be welcoming for the public, but maybe not so much for our staff. And so we're also at the same time addressing staff-related concerns. So this is, as I said, a fully sit-stand station for staff members who require that, and also it's easier to access for many individuals coming to speak to somebody at the service desk. Here's another example. This is our Captain William Spry Library. On the left-hand side, you'll see an image of what used to be a secondary door. So it wasn't the primary door to the library, but it was the door that was closest to the parking lot in that facility. And so we had a very small project where you'll notice in the old picture, there's uneven grades, there's curbs, there's bollards, there's a manual door. It's not a very welcoming or accessible entrance. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see where we've made some small improvements. We took away the curbs, we added appropriate grading to the door, a fully accessible sliding door, and then large-scale, highly visible banners to denote the entrance. So again, just a sample of some of the smaller scale projects that we're completing across the library system. I also want to mention that while we do large renovation projects and a lot of improvements to accessibility does come with actual renovations, we also are trying as much as we can to make improvements to our spaces even when we don't have a renovation. So even when there isn't something that is major coming. And so this picture is a picture of our Sackville Public Library, and it's just an example of where we're trying to lower the height of shelving. We don't use bottom shelves to shelve books because it can be difficult to reach down. We try to keep the aisles as open and clear as possible with good turning radius. So these are all things that we can do with very minimal intervention. And so we are working towards that at our many different locations. And as I said, we know we have some locations that won't be as nice as this picture, and we are working towards making that the standard. And I know I'm probably going over time, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the library as an employer as well. So in this picture, you'll see a library employee who's accessing one of our microfiche departments. And yes, the library still has microfiche. So if you need something looked up, we can get that for you. And we employ over 350 individuals in our community. So we're a medium-sized employer. And in our last employee survey, about 16% of our employees identified as an individual who is living with a disability. So we have a great wealth of information from our employees and their experiences with the library as an employer. So we have made some significant changes in our recruitment processes. We have changed the education and experience requirements for all of our public service jobs. Prior to the change, we were very heavily dependent on formal education as a requirement for most of our jobs, and we have changed those requirements. We're looking at the lived experiences of individuals, the different type of non-traditional education that someone might bring into a role or position. We've changed the roles and responsibilities and grouped them differently into different types of jobs. We've opened up opportunities that will allow individuals with intellectual disabilities to gain employment with the library. We do screening for identified equity groups on all of our external job postings, and we do accommodated and modified interviews for many of our roles. So we're, again, trying to make the library a more inclusive employer and access it. Again, this is all done through partnerships as well. So we work really closely with many community organizations, including the ones that you'll see on the screen. The screen has some logos from Autism Nova Scotia, Teamwork, Cooperative, Independent Living Nova Scotia, MetroWorks, the Disability Rights Coalition of Nova Scotia. We share all of our job postings. We rely on these networks to get the word out about opportunities that the library has. I also wanted to just let you know about a great partnership that we have with Ready, Willing, and Able. They have worked with us over the last several years. They've helped us to identify an inclusive interview process. And so a traditional interview that is a one-on-one conversation with traditional questions and answers really is focused on verbal communication and not necessarily the actual skills and abilities of an individual. So with Ready, Willing, and Able's help, we ran job competitions that had a library tour. There was a structured interview, but it had a shorter component in a quiet room with dimmed lights. Then there was a demonstration of some of the physical tasks associated with the role. And then the candidates would perform those tasks or have a customer service interaction and a debrief. And this was a great partnership, and we learned so much through the development of this modified interview process. Ready, Willing, and Able continued to work with our employees and our managers, even into the post-hiring phase, to make sure that we were had practices that were well suited to the candidates that we hired through that partnership. Also, just briefly, I'll mention we have workplace accommodations. We want to make sure that once we have individuals who we have recruited into the organization, that they're comfortable, that they have the tools and the technology and that they need to perform well within the organization. We want to create a culture of an inclusive workplace, and we've been working on that. And in particular, in our case, based on the information that we have about the staff members and the individuals working in our organization, we have a major focus on mental health and wellness and ensuring that our employees are well and have access to the resources that they need to be successful. So that is a very brief overview of the work that we're doing. I'm probably longer than I was supposed to be, but I am certainly open to any questions that you have about Halifax Public Libraries and how we're working to build an inclusive municipality.
Thank you very much, Ms. Berry. I think I am still unmuted. Yay.
Yep.
Excellent for that presentation. We do have a speakers list, so let me bring it up. All right, Nicole, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do.
You have the
So I'm
floor.
eating supper. I just was interested about the Sunsweet kits. You gave an example of like what was in one kit, like the headphones, the noise canceling headphones and stuff. But can you give me some more examples of like other like different kits, or is that just like examples of what can be in a kit?
Yeah, so there's, I think there's, if memory serves me, I think there's about 4 different kits. One of them is a sensory kit. Another is around, and I can't remember the exact term that's on the other kits, but another example is it's around planning and timing. So there's a lot of things that would be related to, some of those clocks that might have different settings for different times of the day, or sort of reminder tools, those types of things. So there's a whole range of options.
So the idea is to borrow like one of those like for free to see if it would be good for the Stud family to purchase that item.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And well, I don't I was just wondering like how long. So is that like the normal length for a library book?
It depends. So yes, generally in the first instance, it is the regular length, but we have actually done some long-term lendings too. So there might be an individual that needs a little more support or a little more time to check it out. So we've even done some lending of up to like 4 or 5 months. So as long as there isn't a huge amount of demand that we're not preventing somebody else from accessing it, then we will do long-term lending as well.
Okay. And I was just it was interesting to see like the different collections of like the the movies that feature people with disabilities, which in my like when I think of movies, I can't think of a lot that actually have people with disabilities in them. But I was interested to hear about that. And there's just one like physical thing that I noticed at the Central Library in Halifax. When you go in the parkade and you go in the elevator, I noticed the big buttons to press for the floors, and I do like that for people that have issues with sight to so they can see the buttons easier. I like that. But when you get out the door and you need to press the automatic door opener to get into the actual library, the button's like way up high. So like it's good for a standing person, but not a person that uses a wheelchair.
Thank you. Yes.
No problem. I think that's the only one that I noticed. But yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for noting that, and I'll make sure to add it to the list. I will add too that in the next month or so, we'll be launching a new section of our site that will have the ability for community members to offer suggestions and to notify us of exactly those types of things, so that we know and are aware and can start addressing some of them, because we know some people tell us, but then others may not. And so we wanted to have multiple avenues by which someone can report issues.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Jackie, do you have any questions?
Sorry, Andrew, did you say Jackie?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank you for the very wonderful presentation. Sometimes I think that I know everything that's kind of going on, but I've learned a whole lot today. So thank you. And the go forward for the library, it's wonderful to see. This is just a comment, and it's on the side, and I don't mean it as a criticism, but just pointing something out. And this goes for HRM as well. When I looked at the slide of the opening of the new library with the balloons and all of that, The
Mhm.
colors are wonderful, but my first thought went to the environment. So I guess I'm just kind of, and I don't mean to be picky, but balloons are very, very bad for the environment. And I think if we want to elude a image that we're trying in all areas, it might be just something to think about at any kind of celebration. And thank you for indulging me and listening to that. It was just, it kind of hit me. And I thought, nah, I think it's time I need to say something. So thank you again, though, for the presentation.
Well,
Wonderful.
I'm glad you mentioned it because it's actually true and it's come up in the past. And we actually have stopped using balloons as of about, I think it was 3 years ago. It was just before the pandemic with Central's 5-year birthday celebration. And we decided at that point no longer to use balloons. So that is an old picture, but you're right. I should be mindful of the pictures that I use in the display. But yes, I agreed wholeheartedly, and we aren't using balloons moving forward.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jordan, do you have any questions?
I don't have many questions, but I'd like to give my compliments to Halifax Public Libraries and Ms. Berry, Mr. Chair, for this very good proactive work that they're doing in terms of accessibility awareness and actually walking the walk on accessibility. And I hate using those words because it's not an accessible word, but they're actually, you're talking the talk, you're doing, like you're acknowledging the community as the primary source of the information. And every time I go to the Central Library or the Keshe Goodman, I just feel more welcomed, even as an autistic individual. And knowing that you work for Ready, Willing, and Able and Autism Nova Scotia, which I've worked with before, it's great to hear. I did my BBA majoring in employment relations at Acadia. And even at Acadia, the Vaughan Memorial Library was very, like, as much as it could be, it was very much an advocate and a supporter of accessibility, even against some of the grain of traditional administrators. And I just say continue the good work. And I love how engaged you are with the committee and listening to the constructive criticism or support that we're giving. I think a lot of different municipal, provincial, and federal organizations, crown corporations, departments, whatever, could learn from this case study of how to hopefully engage well with the accessibility community. And I want to thank you for that. And
Thank you.
That's all I have to say. I don't have any questions because I think you're doing such great work already. And I like, again, to say what I think Liz mentioned about issues calling 311, to have that portal on your website and even to be able to use assistive technology with it. That would be the only question I have is, are people able to use that portal to engage with the library using assistive technology? I think that's a yes, but I just know that it's an issue that other people have faced. I, as an autistic person who's physically able-bodied, haven't. But I know that even just putting that on the website is so much better than a lot of other organizations or corporations have done. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind remarks.
Councillor Russell, do you have anything to add to their discussion today?
Mr. Chair, I looks like Councillor Russell is no longer in the meeting. He might have had to drop off.
Okay, well, Councillor Deagle-Gammon, you're up.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the lovely presentation and all of the great information about what Halifax Libraries is able to do. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to future infrastructure, future libraries, and if there are any plans there, and what accessibility features might be incorporated into any future growth areas where we're looking at the library. And the other question I might have is, in terms of employment equity, how many employees does the library have? I completely understand that whether people choose to disclose as having a disability is their right and their choice, and so they may not, but are there any statistics around how diverse our population, our employment, persons that we hire at the library.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on those two things. I think it's really interesting. So Liz will know this because the Accessibility Advisory Committee this year, we did consultations to sort of find sort of our path forward of what the library could and should be doing moving forward. And when it came to the physical environment, we heard a lot of really interesting comments. And I think that we learned a lot from that community consultation. One of the things that I found the most interesting was that in some of our newer spaces, like the one that's virtually behind me, they're very accessible, they're very user-friendly for some individuals, but not for everybody. And so even in our newest designs, we're not as inclusive potentially as we had hoped to be. And the issue comes when for one person, it might be accessible, but for somebody else, it may not be as accessible. And so, for example, the light and brightness and airy of Central Library is great for many individuals, but it can be overwhelming for somebody who has sensory sensitivities. It can be too bright for somebody with visual impairment, and there's not enough contrast for that individual to navigate the space properly. And so we have some work to do to figure out sort of moving forward, how can we build spaces that meet the needs of individuals? And through the consultations that we developed and with the discussion with the advisory committee, one of the approaches that has come forward about how we want to build our physical environments is how do we allow individuals control and autonomy over the space that they're using in that moment, in that particular point of time. So a very small example of that would be at Central Library, we have those pods. If you've been there, you see the dark pods there to help sort of reduce some of that brightness. They have lights in them. We had feedback from a community member that said, yeah, those lights are good, but it still doesn't allow me to adjust it to what is right for me in that moment. And so we said, okay, well, we can put dimmer switches on those lights. So that's an example of where in a larger space, we can create smaller spaces where individuals have the autonomy to make it work for them in that instance. Are we going to get everything right all the time? Probably not. But that's sort of one of the key approaches that we're going to take into our design and into the future to figure out how we create those moments and those opportunities for individuals to make the space work for them.
Oh, phenomenal. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
About how you can, person can be self-directed in the space that they need to use.
Exactly. And so we have some major renovation projects coming up in the library, and we have some new developments coming up. And so we're hoping you'll see some of those in the new designs. So Hession Goodman Library is going through a renovation. You might have heard about that in the news. Some of the ways that we're using carpeting in that space will help individuals with visual impairments. We're trying to bring in as much as we can. We have a new director of facilities that will be joining us in the fall. We're very excited for her to be joining us, and she's fully certified in Rick Hansen accessibility. So we're excited for the experience that she'll bring to our spaces as well. Now, in terms of the employment side of things, we have approximately 370 employees. And of those employees, about 16% of the employees have identified as individuals living with a disability, which is above the Halifax labor standard, the labor market percentage of individuals living with disabilities. And you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember the percentage point exactly, but I think we're around 3 to 4 percentage points over the market. Now, we want to improve that still, like we don't, even though we're above the labor market, we definitely are looking to increase the number of individuals with disabilities in our employment as well.
Good news, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Liz, do you have any questions?
So talking about employment standards, there was one example in your presentation.
I was just saying in your presentation, I saw one individual is a deaf individual, so employment equity. It's nice to see an example there in your presentation.
But yeah, there's no questions on my side. I just wanted to throw that comment out there. So there's always room for improvement. With upgrading. So right, that just comes with time. Sometimes it can be a challenge to meet all the needs, all the different diversity needs, because everyone's different. Like I totally understand that that's a challenge, but it's good to see you again. And thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Liz.
There we go. Thank you, Liz, for your comments. Kristen, do you have anything? But I believe Kristen is not here. Am I still correct?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. Rochelle, do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for that presentation. I have to say I'm a fan of the libraries for a variety of reasons. I realized my love of reading during the pandemic. I did not love reading before that, so that's been really fun. But I was just really impressed, honestly, to hear about like all the really cool stuff that the library is doing. And like, especially when it comes to like pandemic related accessibility, like just the fact that you were like, had like bathrooms that people could access from like the homeless population and houseless population, like sort of mid pandemic and mid lockdown was like, oh yeah, like someone is doing something. So I was always, yeah, that was really a cool time. And the fact that you like have tests and like rapid tests and things like that has been really important to me personally. So yeah, I, first off want to say like kudos to the work you're doing. And, to sort of echo what Jordan said, like you're sort of like I feel like the libraries are kind of like a forefront in this work of actually like trying to make changes to make things more accessible and more equitable to like a range of diverse communities. And, especially in terms of like disability and accessibility communities. So that's been really nice. I also wrote down some of the things that you said because I was like, oh, I'm going to use these now. So learned about some new services. So thank you for that. I did just have a question around the hiring practices as well, around like how many, I don't know, and I don't know if there's like a percentage that off the top of your head, but people from any marginalized groups, obviously specifically interested in disabilities, but who are in sort of like managerial positions or positions of more like power versus sort of like on the floor kind of workers and things like that. And just, yeah, wondering sort of how that fits into the general numbers and stats and things of the, equity and stuff in the libraries.
Yeah, so I don't have the exact percentages with me right now, but what I can say is that when it comes to individuals with disabilities, we are well represented in the management team of individuals with disability. Other equity seeking groups, not as much. So that is definitely an area where we need improvement. But yes, in the management team, we're basically equivalent to the entire sort of average of the organization when it comes to individuals with disabilities. So yeah, I don't have the specific numbers with me, but definitely for African, Nova Scotian and Indigenous representation, there's more that we can do there. And in particular, bringing in perspectives of intersectionality and how that relates to the policies that we're building. And so while we know that isn't represented in the management team, we do seek guidance, advice, and support as much as possible when making those policy-based decisions so that we can have the perspective and the lens, as well as working through building out opportunities for individuals in the senior team. like most organizations, we're going through a period of change right now where we have a lot of retirements. So there is definitely a lot of opportunities. So if you know anybody who might want to work at the library, like definitely send them our way, or check out our hiring postings. Like there's several key leadership opportunities that are going to be coming up very shortly. And thank you for your comments about COVID. I think one of the things that positions libraries really well for this work, as well as the work that happened during COVID and others, is that we were founded to serve everybody in our community. And so the libraries take that mandate very seriously, and we are trying to find opportunities so that everyone can participate. And like I said, we don't get it right every time, but we're working to try to get there so that we do. But it is sort of a foundational principle of our organization. So it makes it a little easier for us to have that at the center of what we do.
Totally. And yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm always really impressed with the libraries and like the commitment to actually making things better and more accessible. So yeah, thank you for that and for your presentation.
Thanks.
Okay. Miss Mahoney, are you here?
I am here. You can't see me though, right?
No.
No.
Okay. Okay, that's fine, I guess. Mairead, nice to see you. Oh my God.
It's
Sorry,
been a long time.
it has been. I missed the beginning of your presentation, but I heard, the ending, and I'm really, really happy with what I've heard that the libraries are doing. I think it's so great. And I think it's so great that you're having a person come on that has the Rick Hansen certification. I also have that myself. And when I was looking at the picture behind you and the chairs, my suggestion is to have, like, I find I can't sit on lower chairs. I like kind of higher chairs, or even just to perch and stuff, maybe having a variety of chairs, which I'm sure the Rick Hansen person would help you with. But I'm really excited with what the library is doing. I'm really, really proud of of what you guys are doing. And it's so great. When I came on, you were talking about, having late, I don't know if you said late fees or not, but I remember being a kid in elementary school and a mobile bus coming to our school, and I couldn't get on the mobile bus. So they would actually take me, and I think they would sit me on the floor. I can vaguely remember this, but do you know what I mean? Do you remember mobile buses coming to your schools? And
I remember that.
yeah. I just think I just aged us, but anyway, but no, I mean, I think it's, that was just a cool experience as a kid, I guess, but that I couldn't really take part in myself. But no, I'm really, I echo what everybody said here. And again, you guys really stepped up during the pandemic, just like Rochelle said. And yeah, no, kudos to you guys. And, you can only do one day at a time, right? It's all you can do.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will join that nostalgic feeling for the bookmobile. I waged quite a campaign of one when it was announced they were no longer coming. That was a bad day for me. But anyway, Nicole, you had your hand up. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I just had a follow-up question. I got one Council Diego Gavin reminded me same question about the how many people were employed in the library. So and also when someone brought up the thing about the carpets, that was another thing that I wanted to bring up because I'm a wheelchair user, and wheelchairs and carpets don't go well together. So that's another accessibility thing that people need to be careful of, because when, like, for example, with hotels, they say they're accessible, but I'm like, no, they're not. They have carpet. But anyways, but and also, one day I was downtown anyways, and I needed to find a washroom, because I needed to use the washroom, so I needed to find an accessible washroom. So we went to the library, and while we were in there, the fire alarm went off. So as I was leaving, I could see people standing around the where the fire alarm was, and I was like, oh, then they must be just doing testing. So I was just thinking for for people with sensory issues, like people with autism or like me, I'm not on the spectrum, but I do have another condition that makes sensory environments difficult. And so maybe, like, could there be some announcement or posted somewhere that they're doing periodic fire alarm testing, so I could have my headphones ready?
Yeah, that's a great issue. And that came up in our advisory committee as well. So it's definitely something we need to look into. And I'm sure that the other thing that has come up, particularly around fire alarm testing, is that visual fire alarms are not in all of our library branches at this point. So that's another thing that we're working towards. So yeah, we do have quite a bit of work to do, but that's a great one to add onto the list around giving advance notice of large things. And we've even had
on the website or something.
Advance notice when there might be a large concert that might be a little louder than normal and things like that. So yes. And
when someone brought up the pods in the central library, I don't use them because I'm not in school anymore, or I don't go to the library to do work. But as I recall, I remember seeing them, and you have to step up to get into those pods.
No, then you can roll up, and they've been designed so that you can roll directly into the side of the pod. Rather than so they are accessible from that.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe that you had to step up to get into the pod. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Miss Berry. As a library tech grad, I could talk to libraries all day, but
so in the presentation, there was a slide that you're like, oh, we still have these, and I was wondering what they were. I forget what you called them. Something that people can borrow.
Oh, microfiche.
Yeah, I'm like almost 30, so I have no idea what those are.
Yeah, they're an old format of how we used to sort of archive newspapers and magazines and things like that. So that they're condensed into small versions.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, the microfiche. Oh boy. Thank you, Ms. Berry, for your presentation. It was very informative.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, Annie, would you like to start our conversation?
Sorry, this is Liz. I'd like to speak if I could.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Liz. You have the floor.
Sorry, the interpreter is asking for clarification. Sorry, I would just like to echo what Nicole was commenting on. Nicole in the glasses there, sorry. So I'd just like to comment on what you were speaking to. with any sort of texting and that sort of thing for notification. For, say, example, you were speaking about the fire alarm if something was to happen, or anything else really. If we were sharing information within the library, it would be nice to have the signage up and then sort of have the texting to come up across in order to let people know what may be happening. In my apartment building, they have that, and it is it's really great. I'm trying to remember. On the 104, on the highway on the 104, they have that as well. You see the warning over above sometimes about something being closed or something being repaired, that kind of thing. So I think that would be a fantastic addition to the library. So I just wanted to echo Nicole's comment. So many things, so many thoughts.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next item? Okay. Annie, would you like to begin our discussion on the town hall?
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. I'll keep this a bit brief, but I think it's great that I get the opportunity to speak after Mairead, as we are working very closely again with the Halifax Public Libraries for the planning of this year's town hall, based on the success of the the partnership that was kind of worked on last year. So earlier today, there was a memo circulated at the request of the committee, and following the discussion that we had at our last meeting. We just wanted to circulate a little bit more information about last year's town hall, so that members of the committee kind of had it at their fingertips to be able to see both the agenda, the minutes, as well as the video from last year's town hall, so that in future conversations, members of the committee have that to reference. And in terms of kind of, where the planning is going right now, Melissa and I were able to kind of take the dates that the committee had selected at the July meeting for, potential dates for the town hall to take place in November. And we have now have the Paul O'Regan Hall on hold for both Wednesday, November 16th and Thursday, November 17th. And we will kind of, move forward with just one of those dates in the next couple of weeks. But what we are hoping to do and planning on doing over the next couple of weeks as well is putting out the procurement kind of process for getting some additional external help on some facilitation, the tech side of running the town hall, and also potentially having somebody to help with the design of the event. I think in the past it's been a very kind of panel presentation and questions and answers from folks both in person and last year virtually as well. So getting somebody to potentially come in who might be able to offer a bit of a suite of services and supports to be able to work with both myself and Melissa, the library, communications, kind of everything kind of coming together, and having some folks who might, have a little bit more of experience in the facilitation and event planning side of things, kind of, take the lead on the operational side of it, as long as all of the direction will be coming from the committee. So we'll have some more updates on that for the September meeting. But really knowing that we'll have the space of Paul O'Regan Hall again, we have it booked for a good portion of the day, so that if tech setup is required for live streaming, that will be an option moving forward. And it's also one of the, it's the biggest room that Halifax Public Libraries has within their facilities. So there's a lot of kind of space to move within there, both in terms of the physical space and what can be, done with respect to facilitation of the event. Melissa has also undertaken some conversations with corporate communications so that we can start working on, both the kind of a social media plan at large, or like a comms plan at large that is not only about, promoting the town hall on the HRM social pages, but also making sure that staff, counselors, and residents of the HRM are aware that the event is going to be happening. And then I've just included some future kind of like some considerations for future meetings. But I think right now, one of the biggest kind of piece on mine and Melissa's plate right now is facilitating the procurement process. So a lot of these other pieces will kind of start to fall into place once we know, what those services are going to look like on the procurement side. So, we'll be looking at future meetings for the agenda development, for, the business units that the committee would like to invite to participate in the town hall. The role of the, committee members and sharing the town hall with their networks, so before the event even starts, making sure that folks have what they need to share that within your networks outside of, this particular committee space. We'll talk about the role of committee members at the town hall, at the very least, whether it be in person or virtually, the expectation would be, that members of the committee would be in attendance one way or another, and be able to, provide some support in making the event come to fruition. And one last piece would be around Accessibus logistics as well. And that's really, something that I think Melissa and I can take away and provide updates on and make sure that everybody is aware of, but just wanted folks to know that, accessibility considerations with the event itself and transportation to the event itself are top of mind as they were last year as well. So yeah, a pretty high level update for this one, other than conversations are ongoing. Things are moving along, and I think we'll have some more concrete discussion points for you at the September meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Rochelle, do you have anything? I know you've got some constraints, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I do not have any questions. Thank you for doing that work. That's it. Thanks.
All right. Jackie, do you have anything to add to our conversation today?
Not today, Mr. Chair, but thank you.
Okay, Jordan, do you have anything?
Not particularly, but I just thought of something based on the experience at the library with parking. And I do know that parking is not, I did learn at the library from one of the librarians that the parking is not HPL's purview. It is an HRM lot, and then that is contracted out to Indigo Corporation. So my question is about, for those of us who drive, and I know there's a couple of people who do, or even accessible taxis or cabs or Ubers. What kind of permit or pass could we get if we are driving and we are members of the committee? So we either could find a spot or wouldn't have any issues paying or leaving the parkade if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, to the committee member. So I know that we were able to work with the library last year to facilitate, to get a few passes for members of the committee and staff who were supporting the event. But we do have Mairead here, so maybe I'll
yeah, that's usually not a problem. You just have to identify in advance who you need, and we can get them passes.
Okay. Miss Mahoney, do you have any questions?
Yeah, well, just to piggyback on that driving or parking event, is it where do you have to go and take a ticket? Or do you just pull in and you flat, like what is the process? I know you'll probably tell us closer to the event, but.
Yeah, maybe, so I think that this could largely be something that we could kind of, take care of, like really by email too, just knowing how many folks are going to be driving in, and then we can, figure out like timing and everything for making sure that folks have like tickets for their windows. But it wasn't a problem last year to just, as long as we knew kind of who was coming in advance, and we worked with the library just to make sure that, everybody who we knew was kind of coming in terms of either supporting the event staff wise or supporting the event as a committee member had that option.
Sure. Thank you so much, Annie. I really appreciate it. Because yeah, I will be parking. But there's a really nice parking spot right like close to the library. And I find I get it almost every time. It's right across from the garden. I don't know. Maybe I'm just lucky. I don't know.
Nicole, do you have any comments for Annie tonight?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Annie and Melissa, for your work on this. It was a great success last year, I believe, and we'll see if we can do that again this year. Here we go. Let's see the old man Winter doesn't get his way, shall we? Excellent. Committee members, I see we have none. Staff updates, we have none. Is that still true, Annie?
Thank you, Chair. I did not receive notification of any staff updates prior to the meeting.
Sorry, this is Liz. I had something I'd like to say.
Okay, Liz, you have the floor.
Sorry, I'm just trying to make my thought happen here. So I just want to make sure that I was speaking with whoever is sort of in charge of the interpreting process. I think that would be helpful. Last year, where the interpreters were placed and the ability to see them wasn't great. So if when that time comes, if I could have a little discussion with whoever is planning that piece. The camera was a little bit too far, or the Zoom wasn't close enough on the interpreters. So generally how you can see them here is the better sort of framing. And quite often people who aren't aware of that, when they set them up, they'll have them head to toe, and we don't need them that far away because it is hard to see the finger spelling and the facial grammar, that sort of thing. So, and will we be having captioning this year as well?
Thank you, Liz, and yes, and thank you so much for that feedback. And I know we were discussing that during the meeting itself last year, so that was, one of the things that's certainly top of mind going into this year, making sure that all of the services that are a part of the meeting and are standard for like the accessibility town halls are to the standard that everybody can actually use them in the way that they're supposed to be. So certainly when we get to that process of, putting like staging the area, myself and Melissa can be in contact for sure.
Great.
Thank you very much. Apologies for missing you, Liz. My eyes read faster than my brain, apparently. So we have no updates from staff, no added items. The next meeting will be September 19th, 2022. And can I ask for a movement to move the adjournment of tonight's meeting?
Hi, it's Jordan.
Liz.
Okay, I heard two voices, so that's fine by me. I will see you all on September the